All right, hello and welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today for a webinar on tasks. So my name is Ben Munson. I'm an account executive with FarmQA. And as I mentioned, I'm going to be walking through how you can boost your efficiency with our task management and dispatching tools. So with that, this is a function that we've built and it's been out for at least a year now. We've made some improvements. And so this flow is hopefully honing in on how you write a treatment recommendation, push that out to an applicator, complete that, and get a spray record. More detail about what we'll cover here. So we, like I mentioned, have the ability to create tasks. And so we're going to walk through the process of how you create, assign a task. You can see dashboards of workloads, who's been assigned what, and who's completed different reports or assignments. With that, you can then generate custom outputs. So if you need to say do invoicing based on what's been sprayed, we have some outputs for that, just summarizing how many fields and acres, but also breaking down, say, PDF printouts of compliant reports. And then with that, there's dispatching that goes along with it. So with it being a digital work order, you can get turn-by-turn directions to fields, making sure staff are in the right place and being not getting lost along the way. And then also, if the growers want to get engaged, let's say it's an agronomist and a grower, a co-op and a grower, and the agronomist / co-op is writing a recommendation, they could then collaborate with the grower by assigning them a spray task, and the grower could then get a spray record based on that. So with that, we'll kind of unpack this over the next half hour. And housekeeping things, we do have questions available. So if you have a question as I'm talking through this process within the Microsoft Teams window, you have the ability to ask a question. And then at the very end, I'll work through those questions and attempt to answer them as best I can. This is the FarmQA controller, the web view of our system. And I was walking through the process of a fresh account. So this would be a scenario where you don't have any prior tasks, nothing's really configured within your account for tasks. And as it pertains to dispatching and work orders, what I would recommend is coming into this task tab and task types, and then creating the task categories that are relevant for your business. And so in my case, I'm going to click on this plus button in the bottom left, and I'm going to add a category called, say, ground applications. And this allows me to choose my category. So specifically when we're talking about any sort of chemical applications, fertilizer applications, we want to use this apply category. And what that does, it just surfaces up the button to create these tasks to be linked to a recommendation and a spray record. So I would definitely recommend choosing that apply task. You can choose your icon. So let's just say it's a tractor if you're doing a ground application, and I can save that. Some other examples here is you might want to differentiate out, say, fertility applications as a separate category. And the benefit of doing that would be for essentially filtering. So if you're thinking about after the season or for invoicing, if you want to break out a report quickly that separates out any sort of fertilizer applications from, say, chem applications, the separating these as categories would help with that. And additionally, I would say if you've got aerial applications, same concept there, it might be worth a third task category. And then with that, again, choose your icon and save. Now, while I'm here, I'll just quickly mention, so as part of the task setup, we've created the categories, but you'll notice I also have map colors down here. And I'll say a description, map colors, and instructions. The map colors will come into play once you start to assign tasks. And I'll walk through this, but imagine you've got a color-coded map view and you see, in this case, red are fields that are ready to be sprayed, green means complete. And so you have this color-coded map specifically triggered on your tasks or set to your tasks. And I just wanted to call it that you can change those colors. So if you want, for example, any of your ready tasks to be green and your complete task to be, let's just say, pink, I can change the color coding of that and save that task. And I can also put instructions in here. What instructions mean in this scenario is these will auto-populate. So if I created an aerial apply task and assign it to Ben Munson, these will auto-populate as instructions. So I will add something in here to say, contact Ben Munson to schedule the flight and put contact information in. So now every time I create a task of that category, this text will populate into that task itself. So at that point, I've created tasks. What we'll do next is we'll actually set up and create users and assign them as applicators. And as I do this here, I'm going to go back into a more full-fledged account with more data in it. And so with this, you'll see a few more categories show up, but it's just a separate account of mine. So what I'll do here is I'm going to create a user as part of this webinar. And what I'll be kind of talking through is this user will be an actual, let's just say, an employee of the co-op that is actually doing he's going to drive the tractor, he's going to do the applicating. So we'll call this webinar, webinarbob@gmail.com. We'll say the name, and then we'll do a password. And then I'm going to set them up. So we have these roles in FarmQA. And in my case, I'm just going to set this user up as a standard user. They could be the driver. There's a very slight difference in functionality when it comes to just completing the task out. The standard user has higher permissions as far as doing a few other things in FarmQA that we won't cover today. But feel free to reach out to us if you have questions about what role is appropriate. And I'm going to specifically say that this applicator only deals with my North Dakota division of my, say, co-op or business. So I'm going to save that user, and I'm going to copy this email address. Save that user. So now they are in my system as a user. I can now make them an applicator. So that is an association made that's kind of above and beyond just creating the user itself. So within the advice tab, and this is where I would explain kind of most of your setup, what happened in this tab for any sort of product creation, mix kind of combination creation. But you'll see that there's this applicator tab in here as well. And so what I'll do is I'm going to click the plus button, and I'm going to say this is webinar Bob, license number so-and-so, and his license comes from the state of North Dakota. And now I can associate that with the actual user. And so as I do this, just note that you can have applicators in the system that don't actually have a login. So for example, we work with co-ops where they've got a retired farmer who still has a flip phone. So they're not going to utilize FarmQA for doing digital task management and digital spray records. But that user can still be in the system so that the secretary later on can say, yes, that person sprayed this field, and we still get the license number stamped in with that ticket. So that's where this user count is actually optional in the association process. Regardless, I'll save that user. They are now in my system. And now we've really completed most of the setup work. So it's really just around creating the task types. It's creating the users and creating them as applicators. And now we'll kind of walk through the flow of actually creating a recommendation, dispatching that out, having the applicator drive and navigate to a field. So as part of this process, I'll skip over kind of a lot of the basic recommendation writing functionality, but we do have webinars on that. So if you get stuck on this process, you can reach out to us, or we've got a prior webinar that specifically covers the advice side. So what I've done is I've created a growing season for just this webinar. So I'm going to come into this season, and I'm going to write a recommendation. So we're going to say I am the agronomist. I'm going to filter down to just my North Dakota farm, and I'm going to click on this plus button. Now from here, I can choose the fields that I want to spray. And I like to do that from the map view. So I'm going to pull up my map and multi-select a series of fields to be sprayed. And so in here, I specifically want to spray my cornfields. And so I can multi-select and say, based on our scouting events, we want to spray all 5 of these cornfields. So I've multi-selected the fields. I've pre-built the mixes that I want. So I'll search for my corn, let's say corn post-emerge spray. And then with that, I've got I can preview between different mixes. So if I've kind of undecided, you can preview, kind of click between these, figure out, or maybe refresh yourself what you put into those mixes, select them. Now, as part of this, I've got the products that populate the mix orders and the rates, but as part of the rec process, I can still adjust those rates if need be. I can set water volumes. The pre-harvest interval gets predefined or populated from the product itself. I can add instructions to say, Bob, spray ASAP. And now as part of this, we'll set high priority and put a start date within this rec. So that process, if you're familiar with FarmQA or an existing customer, really hasn't changed. That's just a recommendation. The next step is where we really get more into the dispatching. So as we go through this, I could write a series of recommendations, and I'll just do a few more for, let's say, the beet fields. And I'll grab a random mix here. So as I do this, you can see that this is essentially kind of my job board, where these could be considered work orders, where I click on this and I see I've got 5 fields that need to get sprayed with these products, rates, and totals. And so from this screen, whoever's doing the dispatching or the management of the labor could be in this screen and seeing these jobs. But now what I can do is I can schedule a task. So on the top right, I can click on this schedule task button. And now these are the categories I created initially in the account. If you just do ground applicating and nothing else, there would just be one category there. So don't have to feel overwhelmed with unnecessary categories. Now what it's asking me is, do you want to spray all 5 of these fields? Do you want to assign that to the same user to the same dates? So as part of this, I could say, no, these 2 fields, they're not close to the others, so I just want to do these 3 as part of this job. And so I could say, we're going to spray these today, and I'm going to assign these to that webinar user. And we'll say spray, let's say spray the entire field. We'll put another note in there. So I can create that. What we see is that we have 3 jobs that get created. So simultaneously, even though I just did one series of clicks, we'll slice that into 3 tasks, all assigned to that webinar user. And if you recall, I still had 2 tasks that were unassigned. And so if I go aerial tasks, now I can assign those other 2 that did not previously get a task assigned to them. So as part of this, we now have those jobs created in the system. Before I leave the web view and walk through the view of the applicator, I'll point out a few additional things. If I look back at the recommendation, you can see if I can always click back in and see those jobs that are sitting there and they're not completed. So they're kind of outstanding workload sitting at the recommendation level. However, more commonly, customers are coming in and looking at this overarching job board. And so through this work tab on the left-hand side, you can pre-create views for completed work, current work. I'm going to say completed applicators. But what I can do as part of this is I can create a view just for my, we'll call this the application job board. And as part of this, here's all the details of those tasks I've created, or basically all the tasks. So I'm going to create this and say any task that's unresolved, or in our case, not completed. And then I want columns to be displayed for who they're assigned to. So I can turn those columns off, and I don't care, there's not completed, so I'm going to turn those columns off. So now I have this job board where I see the field information, I see the legal description, acreage, who it's assigned to, and I'm going to save that out. So now going forward in my account, I will always have this application job board, kind of a saved view is how you can think of that. And as jobs get completed, as new jobs get created, this is a living, breathing kind of view of all the outstanding jobs, and I can assign, kind of sort this to see who they're assigned to and who's doing what. And I can also click into the details of a job, and I could see that this one's unassigned, but assign it to somebody within here. The other view, perhaps more common, is a calendar view. So it's a really similar concept to what I just showed in the grid, but this is now showing you the columns being days. and the rows are different applicators. So as part of this, I can see my webinar user, I created those 3 tasks for myself for today. But let's say the manager thinks that I can only handle 2 of these. I could redistribute that workload to a different user through this task view by dragging these items around and reassigning those as needed. So that's more of, like I said, overarching view of seeing the total workload, making sure that things are getting done, nothing gets missed. And the final way to view that similar data is from a map view. So instead of a grid view or instead of the calendar view, you could log in to the map view, and in the top left of the map, slide out our map pane, and there's a field color option where I can color this. I'll expand on my legend. By default, it colors by crop. So you see barley, and barley's gray and beets are red. But if I actually choose to color this by task, I now get this map view of all my tasks, and the legend updates to show me my status of those tasks. And so I'll toggle that again so you can see collectively I have maybe 25 fields here, but of that, only 10 of those have jobs or spray tasks. And so you can see this from a map view, and then from a dispatching standpoint, you could say group tasks logically to a user spatially that would make a logical route or an efficient route. So from here, we'll take a pause and we'll say that's the setup side. We've created the jobs. We can see this overarching view of the workloads. What I'll do next is I'm going to log in as if I'm that webinar user, and I'm going to drive to the field and spray the field. To do that, I'm going to jump onto the mobile application. Let's see if I still have that email address saved. There we go. And so as part of this, I'll log in as I'm doing this. This is available on iOS or Android, so no matter what device an applicator may have, we would work on that. Once I log in, you can see I just was granted access to that North Dakota farm operation. So I just see that subset of fields within my view. I'm going to sync just to make sure I got all those jobs. We do auto sync periodically, but since this is very much a real-time demo, I want to make sure there's no lingering jobs getting pushed to the app. And specifically here, I can go to this work tab. So this is where me as a user, I'm going to be in the webinar season here. Now I can see the jobs that are assigned to me. So as this webinar user, some higher up manager assigned these 3 fields to me. I see them on my app. I can see this is test field 12, field 98, 245. I can see what grower they're associated with. So I have that view. I can now click on any one of those. Well, actually, before I click on them, I can sort these by priority. So if there's the managers have set dates to those tasks, I can filter by that. So I should say sort is a better term. I can also sort by distance. So I see the closer fields to me bubble to the top of that list, or I can group them by crop. So there's some different options that you can choose by clicking on that finish by date button here. As I drill into a task, I can see the details. So I can see who created it. It's assigned to me, when I should finish that, the priority, the details or the notes that were put in here. A couple key things here. This RX button, that pulls up the actual work order. So if I click on that, that will download the job itself. So this is the recommendation or work order, whatever term you want to use, where I can see the products, EPA numbers, rates, and totals. And so I know, what to bring with me essentially for this job. It's worth mentioning that as the applicator, I can click on these little arrow icons, and that would pull up the product labels. So I can actually see the Abound label on the fly and see PPE requirements or whatever it may be from this PDF. So from this should be all the details I need to see to complete my job. So I could have that available digitally, but I can click on this right arrow. And this is where it gets into the actual navigation comment that I made earlier, where we have the field. And as part of this, we can define field entrances. So if you want to set a field entrance, you could actually set an entrance here, and then the navigation would take you to that coordinate. If not, it'll just take you to the centroid of the field, and then the applicator can figure out, where the approach might be. But from here to do that, it's this arrow icon. So clicking on that would bring the user to their default navigation tool. And then this would be their location versus the field, and they could hit go, just like hopefully they're used to or accustomed to with any sort of navigation tools. Once they get to the field, they could see their location next to the boundary. So kind of a final confirmation saying, let's say my mouse might be where the approach is. So they would see a green GPS circle on the approach, and so they know that they're at the right place. They could spray the field. The next thing they would do is they'd complete the job. So they're saying, we sprayed it, we want to complete out this task. Once they hit that check mark, it automatically brings up a spray record form. And so what this means in our eyes is this is the applicator details. And the beauty of this is we're going to populate it with the recommendation details. So hopefully what they sprayed was pretty close to the recommendation, and they can just hit complete. But they can set a few additional things. So if I click in the header here, I have the ability to specify a custom area. So in this case, the field's 155 acres. I want to say I only sprayed 150 of that field. So I can type in a custom area value. We auto-populate temperature, wind speed, direction at the time of application, but we do allow you to override that. If you've got a handheld sensor and you said it was 5 miles an hour, you could enter that value. You can start, we automatically fill the completed time based on when you are doing the spray record, but you can set a start date as well. So as part of that, you can select the time, so maybe an hour earlier and a date, and now you've got a start and a stop time as part of this job. The recommendations, like I mentioned, we're populating in products and rates. You can override. So you could say, I was intended to spray 13 acres, or 13 ounces, but I actually sprayed it at 14. So you can set that as the applicator, and the recommendation record remains the same. So that change from 13 to 14 does not impact the recommendation. It's just a change specific to the spray record. And so there's that reconciliation process you could do later on to find differences. Now, water volume populates, again, you can change that, pre-harvest interval. It populates me as the applicator because I was the one, the job was assigned to me. I can set my application method, so I broadcast this and I submit. Now you can see I'm down to 2 jobs, so before it was 3. So again, I can work my job board down to nothing on the mobile app. And as I do that, those records are automatically getting pushed back to the web view. I should comment as well that we do have an offline mode, so you can still complete jobs in offline mode, and you don't require connectivity. As you complete jobs, like your managers, anybody back at the office would not see that until you came back online. Then that data would get automatically queued up and sent out. So from here, we will move back to the web view. So from the map view, if I click on advice, and I'm going to go back into that 24 webinar season, I can now see just from at a glance, the completed has changed from a red X to an exclamation point. And that just means that at least one or more of the fields has been sprayed. And so you can see which one has been completed and when from this recommendation view, but it also has that spray record tag to it. And so if I click on that, that will pull up the spray record itself. And so this is kind of the culmination of what the applicator entered. Products, rates, totals, in this case, populated from the rec, but I did adjust that to 14. I put in the wind speed. I can see the acreage. So I did 150 acres instead of 155. You can see the pre-harvest interval, rainfast, REI in here, but the application method, and then as you saw me enter there, that's my license number. That's me as the applicator. And you can see the associated job there is closed. So we have kind of the digital paper trail back through the rec to the work order to the spray record, and tracking back kind of who created all that and the pipeline. So that was kind of navigating to the spray records through a recommendation. But I want to call it that we have just a separate tab for just your spray records. And so a scenario here, an important scenario here is saying we've now sprayed for an entire season, and we've got hundreds of spray records on our fields, and maybe you have a compliance report you need to generate. A couple different options here. I can click to view the spray record, and as part of that, I see the details that the applicator filled out, just like we were talking about. But now I can export this. So we have some different options. So under this PDF, if I expand out and show my PDF details here, the biggest change would be if you want a condensed report versus detailed. Condensed would be a good option if you've got 5 or 6 or 7 fields and you want a very just high level overview of who sprayed what and product totals. The detailed is a better option if you want a full page per field with a map included. So I'll generate that out and show you what that looks like. So this is a detailed spray record. All the information we just talked about. Difference here, we're going to stamp in a logo. This is the client name. This is the applicator, application method. You get the time of application, start, stop, units treated, pre-harvest interval, rain fast, or no, just the re-entry and pre-harvest, wind speed. You'd also get a temperature and direction. That does take a little bit longer to stamp in from our system, but you can see that show up shortly. And then the products, EPA numbers, rates, and totals that got applied. And we calculate these totals based on your entered field size. So if you spray the whole field, we're going to calculate that based on the 155. In my case, we calculate it based on the 150. So those totals are overridden, if you will, if a user puts in the area sprayed. Another question we get is going back to maybe they want all the raw data out of our system. So instead of going to a PDF, you can multi-select all of your spray records, and we could push that into an Excel export. Actually, I want to go over here and do this one. So this Excel export would generate out all those spray details. And as I open that up, we'll see the columns for, this would be the grower name, field name, crop. And as we work through here, that's the applicator license number, start, stop time. You'd have the applied acres, the products, registration numbers. So really all the details that we're tracking here, and really this should check a lot of boxes for any sort of reporting that needs to be done out on your sprays. And so that's just a secondary way to get this out if you want to slice this out further, if you want to filter it further, just showing you that that data is easily exportable. And as part of this as well, so I've got that spray record in here. I want to call out that it's also visible on the field itself. So notice that I sprayed this one on test 12 as a field name. So if I go back to my map view, and I'm going to go to test 12 once that loads up. And you can see from a map view that that has been completed. If I click on that field, we see a couple things. So we're now showing you, based on the re-entry interval, we'll throw a warning saying that you are within that window, meaning it's not safe to go to that field based on the product labels. And we'll also show you that pre-harvest interval, saying you're not past that pre-harvest interval based on your spray. And then, within here, we've also got the events. So I wanted to mention, if I click on the events, that's another place where all those spray records would live. So on this field, if I sprayed it 3 times, 4 times this season, I would get all those spray records built up here. And I could filter by just showing my spray records and then export from here. And that's another way to access really that same report. It's just doing it at a field level if that's how you think about reporting, or that's how you need to report it out at that level. Also, it's worth mentioning, so I've got that trigger here, or that warning about the re-entry interval. If I attempt to now create a new task, and maybe it's going to be a scouting task, I want to send an intern to that field, it's going to remind me that as well, saying, nope, you're within that interval of when we said not to go in there. So that is visible there so that you can see that. We allow you to still create a task if need be, like we won't absolutely stop this, but we do tell you that that's within that window of time. Same thing on the mobile app. We do show you, if I go to that same field, let's go to test 12. We'll see that warning across the bottom down here where it shows October 31st, and it says this field is off limits for reentry until October 30th. So that's a new kind of trigger or safety component we built in on the sprays as well. So with this, that's kind of the majority of the workflow going back through start to finish. I just call out that back to that map view is a pretty common use where that field is now completed versus those other two fields you saw me multi-select initially are still set as ready or needing to be sprayed versus those other two blue ones I actually did spray and complete those jobs. So that covers a lot of it. The last component in the PowerPoint side, I was talking about invoicing and kind of reconciliation across what's been invoiced out. So as part of this, we've got that application job board, but I've actually pre-created this completed application report. As part of this, we've got built into here, I've got the date column off. Let me pull that in quick. So we'd have the date. There should be the complete. Oh yeah, I was just not seeing it. So the completed by date here. So I could say, just filter this to date filter or last 30 days, so that if you want to invoice out to say we need to invoice everything from October, I could filter in FarmQA, or you could push this out into Excel, and then you get a similar output here, and that's where you can slice out and just invoice on like those 3 I did in October. And then this should be the details about fields and acreage and kind of a roll-up view of all those sprays. So that kind of wraps up the dispatching. The other thing I'm going to mention here is that we did add a new task category of tillage. And so you can now do a tillage task. And one interesting use case we've had here is if I do a tillage task, and then we can, back on the task list of, I can do tillage report. So similar to what I did with all my completed sprays, but now I have these tillage events. We have people using this for, say, carbon monitoring, carbon reporting, because we get the date, the time. You could put the type of tillage done as a note or instruction and a piece of equipment. But then back in the field journal as well, we'd show that event happened, and a higher overarching view of the events. So quickly mention that. And with that, I know I've gone a little bit over my half hour here, so I'm going to turn it over to questions. And again, if anybody joined late, we are using Microsoft Teams for this webinar, and within the Microsoft Teams window, there should be a little chat icon in the top left that allows you to ask me questions. So please do that now. And as I'm allowing you to give you time to do that, I just say that we're going to continue to do more webinars into the winter. So coming up, we have FarmQA days, like I mentioned, in Fargo. And then following that, we'll do a series of webinars on some of our other newer features that we're going to be rolling out and showing at those FarmQA days. So stay tuned. If you have questions about this process I showed today, this webinar is going to get posted as a you can watch on demand, and then you could also reach out with questions to our support team, and I'll pull up that slide as we end here. So here's our contact information with questions, and then meanwhile I'm going to be pulling up the chat and seeing if there's any questions. I appreciate you joining today and the time.